Good morning and welcome to the February Downtown Aviation Redevelopment Subcommittee here at the City of Phoenix. I'm Daniel Valenzuela. I'm honored to be the chair of this subcommittee. I'm also the council member for District 5 for Central and West Phoenix. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilwoman Thelda Williams from District 1, Councilman Bill Gates from District 3, and Councilwoman Kate Gallego from District 8. Thank you all for being here. We began this particular subcommittee and we end this subcommittee with a call to the public. Do we have any? We only have cards for these items, but nothing for the beginning of the meeting. Do we have a motion for the approval of the December 2nd minutes?
Moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4 is for consent. The issue RFP for event security for Phoenix Convention Center.
Move approval.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Items 5 through 7 are information and discussion. What we've had on this subcommittee for the past several months is a standing item for the FAA flight path update. And I will turn the floor over to our aviation director, Mr. Jim Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will, in a moment, turn this over to Jordan Feld to give you an update on some of the activities. But in the breaking news category, this morning, just a little while ago, the House has introduced its FAA reauthorization bill. And I'm happy to report that the bill that has just been introduced does have some language in there with respect to reviewing flight procedure changes that have occurred since 2012, and it appears that that language would be very favorable to what Phoenix has been trying to accomplish over the past year or year and a half. So I can't give you the details of it right now because, like I said, it's I think they're still having the press conference, so we're just getting an opportunity to digest the language, but once we fully understand those provisions that are within that bill, we will brief in more detail on each of you. And now we'll turn it over to Jordan Feld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bennett, members of council. Hard to top that report, but just very quickly, we've received approximately 27,000 plus noise complaints since the FAA's implementation of RNAV from approximately 1,700 households. We just launched this week our new noise complaint app, an extremely streamlined process to submit your noise concerns to the aviation department. We've already received positive feedback on that. We are, of course, still tracking the FAA IFP Gateway portal. There's no new flight procedures proposed there, so nothing new there. On the legal front, as you're aware, all parties towards the mediation have agreed to enter mediation, so as that progresses, we'll provide more feedback and progress in the future. So with that, this very quick update, staff again appreciates the opportunity and would be happy to address any questions or concerns.
Jordan, if the public wanted to find this app, who might be watching right now, where would they go to find the app to download that? I presume for their phone or their tablet or.
Thank you, Mr. Blue. Members of the subcommittee, skyharbor.com/flightpass has a direct link to the app.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by my colleagues? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item, number 6, we'll keep Mr. Bennett here. Overview of the Aviation Department's Capital Improvement Program.
Mr. Chairman, once again, thank you, and members of the committee. What we would like to do today is just update you on our 2017-21 through 2021 capital improvement program budget for the airports, and this is for all 3 airports, Deer Valley, Goodyear, and Sky Harbor. Joining me today is Mr. Jay DeWitt, our Deputy Aviation Director for Financial Management, that will walk you through the presentation very briefly.
Chairman Valenzuela, members of the subcommittee, I'm glad to be here and talk about the capital improvement program. With 44 million passengers at the Sky Harbor, we are a top 10 large hub airport and $29 billion in economic impact and 55,000 employees. This is a major economic generator in the area, and we're glad to talk about what we're planning for the future. And over the, let's see, as of December 31st, 2015, we had $581 million committed. That's 74% of our total budget, most of that going toward Terminal 3 modernization. You've seen it going up. There's a lot of progress being made, and that's exactly where we wanted to be about this time of year. The current program is worth $257 million and is combined in 48 projects spread over the 3 airports that you see up on the wall there. With 42 projects going to Sky Harbor, we will not go over all 42. I just wanted to highlight a few. And most of those, in fact, a little over half of them are going to be airfield pavement projects. These aren't exciting projects. We're replacing concrete with new concrete. And but these are very important for the safety of aircraft that are arriving and departing and avoiding having those things go into their engines. So of course, the big one is Terminal 3 modernization, and the council approved a major step forward on that project here in the spring of 2015. And so we've got some pieces of it left to do as far as coming to the council and taking care of the rest of it. It is going up quickly. Terminal 3 is showing outside signs of it. There's also a small building that they're moving the staff that was currently in Terminal 3 to another building off-site that you've probably also seen some crane work and construction going up. So that project's on time, and we're on budget, and we're glad to see it going along. But also, Terminal 4, lots of exciting things going on there. Terrazzo, you'll see carpet being pulled up. We spend about $1 million a year on carpet replacement. We're going to replace that with Terrazzo, which is good forever. Terminal 2, which has been in place for about more than 50 years, the Terrazzo still looks wonderful. The roof leaks, the building isn't great, but the Terrazzo is terrific, and it will be. It's very easy to maintain, and it'll last forever. So there's a net present value of about $3 million for that project that instead of continuing to plow money into carpet, which wears and looks bad, the Terrazzo will last forever. We're glad to have it. And then the international facility downtown in the basement of Terminal 4, the North Concourse, we are making some improvements there, that about $20 million in new escalators that will get people off the planes faster, get them through the customs facility and to their destinations. And although it didn't make it onto the biggest, most expensive projects, we're also making some sustainability improvements, replacing old fixtures, light fixtures with LEDs. And Councilman Gates, you'll be pleased to see we've got a big project coming out of East Economy where we'll be replacing all the lights there with new efficient LEDs. Of course, at Deer Valley and Goodyear airports, we are also making some investments, and unfortunately, they're not very exciting. These are airfield pavement projects, replacing old concrete and asphalt with new stuff, but very important to the ongoing safety. This is just an overlook of the capital commitments that we've made over the past 10 years. And you see some peaks and valleys there, peaks being, for the most part, between 2007 and 2012, related to the Phoenix SkyTrain. 2016, you see another peak, and that's related to Terminal 3 project. The funding sources for the project, they are not value. There are real numbers associated with that. There's $45 million for passenger facility charges and $79 million for the grants. We go through a feasibility process analysis every year, and we craft this thing. It varies from year to year, as you might imagine. But the Airport Improvement Fund is airport cash, and then we try to maximize the amount of grants and passenger facility charges every year so we can keep our rates low and keep the airport affordable. That AIF, or the Airport Improvement Fund, is, again, not value, but about 59% of that is attributable to the airlines, and then 23% is from terminal concessions, and then minor contributors to that is kind of filling out the bottom there. But that's airport cash, and a lot of that will be going toward this new program. That concludes my prepared remarks. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions or comments by my colleagues? Councilwoman Gallego?
Thank you very much for the update. I think this group is looking particularly forward to hearing more about Terminal 3 at future council meetings, as that certainly is the big one. But I have my annual tradition of talking about the parking garage, which I think I'm going to revisit. So we've heard from folks in our office who've gone to the airport, for example, for an honor flight, and then been unable to find their car in the parking garage, and who've asked, could we repaint it so that it's more of the parking space numbers are legible, and maybe differentiate the floors with different colors, or, because it is on two sides, it's sometimes confusing to folks who don't realize the layout and haven't studied a map. And so continuing my annual tradition, is there a possibility to look at that project?
Absolutely, and might I just note that, we've been working on that. And in fact, in September, we made some signage changes in the T4 garage, where now we are associating the floors and the zones with the same information that we have in the terminals. So, for instance, the A gates would be associated then in the garage now with elevator A and then zone A on floor 4, so that it tries to orient the garage locations with the elevator banks and the concourses in the terminal. And we made those changes on those signs in the garage back in September. And then we have another program that we will try to do a more permanent wayfinding improvement as part of our CIP.
Wonderful. Does our vendor share with us the complaint data and the usage of people who are pushing the emergency button to get, has it helped?
I can't answer that today, but we will certainly find out and get you the data if we have it. Certainly
We have a
will.
lot of great folks, including our volunteers who sometimes use the garage, and
Right.
the more time they can be out helping people navigate the airport and instead of navigating the garage themselves, I think,
We agree.
the better. And then we got a concern also from one of the airlines about that the pavement it did not last as long as originally, airfield pavement as long as originally expected, and that we were back early. And I guess, did we talk to our vendors? Could they help us pay for some of those costs if it didn't perform as hoped?
I believe the reference is probably to the repaving program that we have on Apron associated with
Yes.
Terminal 4. And I believe those pavements are about 20 years or so old. And the concrete mix that was used has had a silica reaction that has occurred that has resulted in some of that pavement now starting to degrade. As technology moved forward, people figured out that the concrete mix design that was used 20 years ago is not such a good design to use anymore, and so it's not used anymore. But those pavements are so old that there's really not a recourse, and it was accepted design standards back when it was built some 20-something years ago. We would love to have pavements last longer, but in that case, it's not going to be the situation. We're going to have to replace them.
Wonderful. Thank you. We always like to tell our partners we're looking to keep costs down.
Absolutely, and that is, there's a lot of grant funding associated with that work that's being done by it's grant funded by the FAA.
Wonderful, thank you. And we also did, with going back to the garages, get questions about the lighting in the garages, which is not particularly energy efficient, and often, maybe it is energy efficient because they're out completely, so.
Well, we are also, as I think Jay mentioned on the East Economy, in all of our garages, we're in the process of going through and changing out lighting to LED, more efficient and somewhat brighter LED lighting throughout all of our facilities.
Fabulous, great news, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair? Jim, I'm going to refer to Gateway for the moment. The tower there is the old Air Force Tower. And I want to lobby when I go to Washington in March, but there's some language difficulty because the FAA doesn't recognize it as a tower because it was a military tower. Could you get me more information on that, and also maybe get some advice from your lobbyists on how we can get the language changed? Because ultimately, I don't want us to have to pick up a big share of building a new $20 million tower out there. but it has to happen because it is 20 years old, the elevator is not working, and it doesn't meet FAA standards anymore, or it never did, actually, so. But
Right. We will get you that language and that information that you need. Certainly will.
thank you.
Be happy to.
Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation and the good work. Just one thing as it relates to capital is Terminal 2. And, you know, Mr. Bennett, now that you've been here for a little while, wondered if you've had an opportunity to look at the, you know, long-term plans for Terminal 2 and, you know, if there's any sort of a general sense. I mean, I hear about this a lot of if there's any kind of a timeline on the future of Terminal 2 and how that relates to everything that's going on at Terminal 3.
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Gates, the planning as we sit here today is that once the Terminal 3 modernization program is complete, then the airlines that are currently located in Terminal 2 will migrate to Terminal 3, and that will facilitate our ability to remove Terminal 2 from the campus. It needs to get out of the way. It's an old facility. It's been a great facility, but it has exceeded its useful life. And it then, once we can get that facility removed, as air traffic continues to grow, then we would have an area that we could start development of another complex if we needed to. So the plan is to tear it down.
And when you say it's complete, do you mean like the one, because I know right now, I think we're just doing the work, we're doing like one side at a time on the gates. Would that be the completion of the whole project at 3 or somewhere?
Complete the whole project at 3, which is, right now, we are in the phase of doing the central core, the processor part of the building. And then once we're complete with that, we move to the south side and demolish the existing south concourse and build a new, larger concourse on the south side. And then after that phase is complete, then we move up to the north concourse and completely refurbish the north concourse. So once those 3 phases are complete, that's when we would move to Terminal 2 demolition, which is probably around 2020 or 2019, 2020.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Bennett. Appreciate it. Okay, next item is number 7.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, you know, we have made, as a community, a lot of investments in the convention center and in upgrading downtown. But even yet, when we do this, we still have streets that have kind of their original character of 20 and 30, of the 1970s in some cases. And so the council's desire, the community's interest, and staff's work probably, and Chris will get you to the precise detail, but more, you know, I want to say almost 2 years ago, we engaged in a community study with some design ideas for how Adams Street, from the front door of the convention center all the way to Central Avenue, might be enlivened. And so staff is here to tell you, to recount where we started, and then to tell you about something the council did authorize just recently that involves private investment on Adams Street to start the first steps of implementing the ideas of the plan.
Good morning, Chairman and subcommittee members. We are here today to provide you an update on the Adams Street Activation Study, and that study was authorized by Council in December of 2013. This was a community-driven study that produced some interesting results relating not only to the city, but private property owners as well. With me today is the Deputy Director of Community Development, Eric Johnson, and he will give you an update on the study itself, some of the outcomes of the suggestions from the study, and some of the implementations that are taking place today. Eric?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, subcommittee members. As you may recall, about 2 years ago, Paul gave a great introduction. He always steals some of our thunder. But 2 years ago, we did a study where we did outreach with the 4 major properties that are adjacent to Adams Street, generally located between Central Avenue and 2nd Street, where the entry point is to our convention center. And the primary property owners along that block is the Renaissance Hotel, the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The city owns a parking garage there, the Regency Garage. Then there's a private property owner that owns the Hanny's building, and then again, the city owns a parking lot we call the Adams lot that's on that street face. So the study began on focusing on how to activate those street frontages, how to better utilize our right-of-way, as well as how can we help create more economic activity and help foster business growth on that street, as well as provide a better pedestrian experience along that street frontage. Over about a 9-month period, staff and our consultant worked through over 30 community meetings, 4 design charrette sessions where we actually got out with markers and maps and everyone started marking up all the plans. We were lucky to have a lot of great community members come in, and over 100 people participated in this activity, which then generated a report that we presented to council on December, I believe, 28th in 2013. The report summarized basically 5 major recommendations to move forward in future policy endeavors for when projects were coming online around the project area. One of the first recommendations was to help support special events that are happening in that area. We have frequent events, whether it's in between 1st and 2nd Street, or the Renaissance Hotel often has block party events as well. But they wanted us to, the community felt that we should work at doing better event infrastructure. So having electrical locations set up so we can host the stages and other things for like Viva Phoenix coming up here in the future, as well as how can we do better temporary right-of-way restrictions with sleeves to insert bollards into, as well as tree placement so that you can have better gathering for special event activities, but also provide shading along the community areas. Another recommendation was to work along for the Hyatt Hotel. It was, obviously the hotel was originally designed to front onto 2nd Street and facing our convention center, but we found that there is a major connection that happens along the light rail corridor and connecting people along Adams Street. So it was trying to find ways to help the Hyatt activate that southern frontage onto Adams Street. And so they do have some design challenges with certain parts of their back of house, but there are other areas that were identified that they could expand their commercial square footage and change around some of their interior space to then open up windows of activity onto the street frontage. So one of the recommendations was also to allow the street, if you recall walking down that street, there's quite a bit of room on that sidewalk. So the city's way of helping participate in that would be to help them activate portions of the right-of-way, which I'll be mentioning here in a moment for another project. On the Regency Garage, that's a property that we actually own. That garage, there's a couple tenants that are in that location, but there's also some vacant space. The primary recommendation that came out of the study was to, first of all, look at reactivating those vacant spaces and try to get some users into that. The convention center has pursued an RFP, and there was a recommendation out of that we're still in negotiation with. But then the other recommendations were to focus on how can we, should budget afford us the opportunity to look at refacing the building, look at doing better signage, different ways to help activate that ground floor element and work on landscaping in that area as well. For the Adams Street parking lot, the recommendation is to issue an RFP. As of yet, we haven't seen a lot of private sector interest on that site, but the desire from the community was to look for something that's appropriate in scale to be next door to the Handy's building. Obviously, we have a historic building there on that corner, so we don't want to have something that's going to dwarf that or have any negative impacts to that building. But also the site is very challenged from a site development perspective. So to get the appropriate scale of project will be something that we'll be looking for when we get to the point to be able to issue an RFP on that property. The recommendation from the community was looking for ground floor activation in a form of commercial or office space with either residential or other uses up above on the upper floors. And then the fifth recommendation is actually the exciting one, because we've been working with our partners at the Renaissance Hotel to actually move the recommendations forward on this location. But the study was recommending that if you think of the site, there's a drop-off on Adams Street currently that takes up their major frontage with the vehicle pull in and pull out Port Cochere area. It's to relocate that onto First Street and then have them activate the arcade that's around that building and do modernization to the exterior of the building to bring some of the store frontages out, create new sidewalk and new landscaping and shading opportunities along the north side of Adams Street there, and then allow that to create that better pedestrian experience and increase some commercial square footage along the property.
Who's going to pay for the improvements?
The private property owner is paying for all these improvements. The city's participation in the Renaissance Hotel project is that we are going to be leasing portions of the right-of-way to them to activate into their private use. But the city's participation is allowing them to activate the right-of-way through a lease.
Do we have to change any of our policies or ordinances to allow this to happen, zoning, planning, whatever?
Mr. Chair, Councilman Williams, I believe the current codes provide us the ability to do the actions that are proposed, but we'll make sure to come by and brief you on the precise details of what those are so you can kind of see them and be comfortable. But we believe all authority exists within the city code to do what is proposed.
Thank you. So the recommendation in taking a visual form of further designing the recommendation for the Renaissance Hotel, you see before you two screenshots, one of the current existing improvements that are on the left side of your screen, and then on the right side, what the further designed elements are of the design group of Holder Construction and Gensler Architects. And what you're seeing is the taking of the recommendations of the plan and doing a enhanced streetscape paving materials, trying to give some visual diversity to that, changing up the landscape palette, and then relocating, you'll see on the far right-hand side, relocating the vehicle drop-off and pickup areas on the east side of the hotel to create a better pedestrian experience along Adams Street. Visual representation of what this could become. We're currently working with their engineers and architects. They have not submitted their building permit plans, but we're working through that preliminary planning process to do the engineering and the site designs. And we're sitting with meetings with the street transportation and water departments to make sure we figure out all of the street right-of-way improvement requirements. But you're seeing here a rendering of what the new elevation would be when you're standing on Central Avenue and you're looking to the east back towards the convention center. And you're seeing new pedestrian areas where you can have seating areas, the activation of the arcade area where they have new restaurant locations pulled out up front, an enhanced sidewalk, as well as new tree landscaping going along the street there. Another view if you're standing on First Street and looking back to the west. So this would be the corner on the right-hand side. You see the entrance to the new main entrance, vehicle entrance to the hotel. They'd still have their entrances on Adams Street and Central Avenue, but this would become the vehicle entrance. And then you can see on the corner how if you can recall walking by the block right now, there's actually an open-air arcade that's next to a hair salon tenant in the building, and that's kind of an open space, but they would actually activate that space with a new commercial space, bring that out into the arcade area, and then create new shading structure. Actually, I believe the next image here is if you're standing on the sidewalk looking towards the west. So this, you see there's new shade elements up above the sidewalk area, so we're getting that shaded area. The shade structure would be a form of louver that allows for shading at different times of the year. And on the right side, you see the activation of the storefronts coming up front, creating some more usable space for the tenant, but then also creating a larger sidewalk on the street frontage right-of-way for the public and the people moving along from light rail into the convention center. Where we are in the design process is we are currently council approved in October the request or the authorization for the city manager to enter into a lease deal. We have two leases actually that currently exist on the site. One is for the arcade area that goes around the building, and that was approved in 1974. We're actually having to modify that lease for where the arcade is to allow them to actually utilize that space for commercial space. So that was one of the two actions, and the other action that was approved on that ordinance was to allow us to enter into a new lease for the activation of the right-of-way along First Street for the valet operation. We've generated a number of leases for valet use in the downtown area, and we've followed the guidelines that are required through the street transportation guidelines for utilizing the public right-of-way for that valet use. So we're in the process of working through the design criteria. We're looking to, once we get that design details set between the Street Transportation Department and the contractors, we're going to hold a public forum to bring back the community members that were involved in the Adams Street study to show them these details before they actually bring anything into the city for formal building permit plans. And that concludes my comments, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions or comments by my colleagues? Councilwoman Williams?
When do you anticipate we'll actually see some of this happen?
Thank you, Councilwoman. That's a great question. We believe that they will be done in approximately a year to 2-year timeframe. We're going through the design construction phase, but we're hopeful they'll be done closer to the year timeframe. But once you start digging up into roads in the older part of downtown, sometimes some hiccups occur. But we're expecting between 1 and 2 years.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation. It's exciting. Thanks for, I know these are just renderings, but it's making it, it's moving us toward this more walkable downtown as well with the shade and everything else. It's great. All right, next item is item 8. And I think we have Ms. Mackey back up here. Authorization to enter into the Derby Roosevelt Road Development Agreement. Ms. Mackey.
Good morning again, Chairman and subcommittee members. We're here today to talk to you about an exciting new high-rise residential development located on the northwest corner of 2nd Street and McKinley. Here with me today is the program manager, Christine McWright, who will give you an overview on the project, how we started, what the project looks like, and then I will kind of tag team in with her to get you all the information you need today. Christine?
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, we are here today to present Derby Roosevelt Row. The developers, Amstar McKinley, are a partnership between Amstar and Transwestern. They submitted a proposal pursuant to the downtown RFP requesting GIPLET. The privately owned site is located at the northwest corner of 2nd Street and McKinley within the downtown redevelopment area of Roosevelt Row, west of Central Avenue, west of Public Market and the light station as well, light rail station as well, and just a few blocks north of ASU downtown. The site is currently underutilized and has remained vacant since its demolition of the previous structure in 1979. The proposed project, Derby Roosevelt Row, is a 211-unit high-rise multifamily development in 19 stories, of which 5 levels are internal parking. In Amstar McKinley's proposal for GPLET, the developer outlined a clear financial gap that would prevent delivery of the project to the market unless GPLET assistance is provided. There are 2 primary factors, and they are related. Developing high-rise structures is a very costly endeavor and becomes even more complex and costly when developed on a small, challenging site. In order to build dense, high-quality residential units, the project must achieve rent levels necessary to support a reasonable return. Projected market rent levels are not quite at this level to support an acceptable return at the project. While rents are rising both downtown and in other active submarkets in the Metro Phoenix area, they are still below a level that would allow a project such as this one to stand on its own. The development provides benefits to the community in that it aligns very well with growth initiatives currently underway downtown, and it will provide dense residential living options that are very walkable within the urban core. The property is ideal for downtown employees, students of the U of A Medical School, as well as the soon-to-open ASU Law Campus, and the project's unique design at a competitive price point will afford a larger pool of residents an opportunity to live in a Class A high-rise development. In accordance with the RFP process, staff convened a panel to review and score the proposal based on specific evaluation criteria and make a recommendation. The panel consisted of representatives of Evans Churchill, Downtown Phoenix, Inc., as well as city staff from CED. The panel unanimously recommended proceeding to negotiations with the developer. Today, Dan Cohn with Amstar, as well as Josh Delk with Transwestern, and their zoning attorney, Stephen Earle, are here on behalf of Amstar McKinley, LLC. Transwestern, based in Houston, is a significant multifamily developer with several major projects underway, including 2 in partnership with Amstar on the screen before you. 704 in Austin, and Southtown Flats in San Antonio. Amstar holds a very significant portfolio of multifamily assets with more than 8,700 acquired in the last 25 years. Now for the project overview, Derby Roosevelt Row is a proposed high-rise multifamily project consisting of 211 market-rate apartments. Located on a relatively small site at just over 14,000 square feet, the planned 19-story building represents one of the most densely developed residential products downtown. The project consists of a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom units, all furnished, averaging about 400 square feet, with a projected average asking rent of $1,300. This unique, high-quality, boutique-like development offers furnished apartments that will be intentionally built to maximize space while optimizing functionality. The property will also provide an amenity deck on the 6th floor, offering a resort-type pool, a fitness center, and a business center for residents. Resident parking is located within the building on levels 1 through 5, providing 120 spaces with 14 levels of apartments above. In addition to a lobby and parking access in the building, the first floor will include 4,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space. Derby Roosevelt Row offers a niche product commonly referred to as micro units. These apartments are smaller than average, and they're urban. They offer a great value for prospective residents at an outstanding location. According to Real Data Apartment Insights, Derby's projected rents of $1,300 per unit per month on average are well aligned with the current overall market rents for Class A, both in downtown and across the metro area, where they are $1,374 right now and $1,380 respectively. Staff has negotiated the following business terms with Amstar McKinley. Following City Council approval, the developer will have 12 months to execute the development agreement, after which Amstar McKinley will have 18 months to begin construction and 36 months to complete. At completion, the developer will enter a 25-year GIPLET lease, which includes 8 years of abatement. Annual lease payments have been negotiated and will be made to the city during the 25-year period. In addition to the standard terms and conditions that are typically included in the development agreement, Amstar McKinley will enter a parking agreement for the development, which Ms. Mackey will discuss.
As we worked on this project, one of the concerns we heard from the surrounding neighborhood was parking and their challenges that they have with parking in that community area. While Amstar McKinley came forward with a recognized parking study that was accepted by our Planning and Development Department and does meet our sustainability bonus credits, which would have allowed for 100% reduction in parking on this site, they have requested a parking ratio of 0.57 parking spaces per unit. Since this is the first time we've really seen micro units in our downtown market, we don't know what to expect. So what we proposed and the developer accepted was the City of Phoenix would enter into a parking agreement with Amstar McKinley for a period of 3 years should the facility need additional parking. So they're very confident in their parking study. They believe that the 120 spaces is ample parking places for their units and for the workforce of the retail project. Should they, as they're moving forward, should they require additional parking spaces, they will be reporting to the Community and Economic Development Director on a quarterly basis on their parking availability and their units that remain available. They will provide information to our department that will show how many units remain available, the parking spaces that are available or lack thereof, documentation of individuals who don't own a car, so they don't need parking spaces, documentation of others who have secured parking in other locations. As an example, I already have a parking space here in downtown Phoenix for my office, and so I wouldn't secure another parking space for my car should I live there. I would walk back and forth and simply save that money, which is one of the options. They could also select in Arizona Center. They could select in any of the number of surface parking lots that offer those options. But as a backup to any parking being available, they can also pay at then prevailing market rates in our east parking garage to the City of Phoenix, and the developer would enter into agreements on a monthly basis for any number of stalls that they would need from us should other parking options not be available. And again, it would be at the then prevailing rate of our parking spaces at that time. So it gives us an opportunity Even though the development is not required to meet the downtown code based on the sustainability bonus credits that they received through our downtown code, it gives the city assurance that they now have one parking place per unit and parking for their retail user, not their retail users, but their retail employees, so that they don't put any additional burden on the surrounding area. Oh, and there I was.
There you go.
As we look at the benefits that this project provides to the city of Phoenix, this would be approximately $36 million in new capital investment into our downtown market, with about 250 new construction jobs over the duration of about an 18-month construction period. The city would see about $370,000 in construction sales tax revenue into the city, and we have negotiated a lease rate for the property. So even though this is a privately owned property, in order to experience the government property lease excise tax, as you know, the city takes ownership of the property through a lease transaction and leases back. So we do collect a lease on that property for the duration of the term. What we have negotiated is starting at $10,000 per year in the beginning and moving up to the end of the 25th year, they would be paying the city $250,000 a year for a lease rate on that property, on top of the payments that we make in the excise tax.
Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 250,000, where does that money go? Does that go into the general fund, or does that go into the downtown development fund?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Gates, it would actually go into the Commercial Reinvestment Fund, which is our downtown fund, and that is a fund that council can use with your approval at public hearings to do different projects in downtown, to do different marketing or other economic development opportunities should they arise. It does provide City Council a fund that they can work with to add additional opportunities in downtown.
And do we have a sense of, if the GIPLET were not in place and this development were done, what the property tax is that will not be generated and collected?
Pardon me, I've gotten a little older. They need to make my numbers bigger, one or the other. We're gonna have to go one direction or the other. Yes, sir. If the property tax were to develop as it would without a GIPLET, should it be built that way, over the 25-year period of time, our estimate of what the full property taxes would be about $14.5 million over that period of time. When you take what the lease payment is that they would provide to the city, which would be about $3.2 million over the 25-year period of time, their excise tax, which would be $2.2 million over 25 years. They have negotiated a hold harmless with the Phoenix Elementary School District, so they will be providing revenue directly to the school district of about $400,000. As we look at that, the difference in the property tax is approximately $8 million. So while that seems like it's a significant amount of money, what that takes the return on investment to is, instead of a 6% return on investment, which is very challenging in this market to get capital on a 6% return on investment, it takes it to a 7% return on investment. It moves it up by a percentage point over the 25-year period of time, and that's on an averaged out over a 25-year period of time. So we start at a 7% return on investment in year one, and we fall to a 6% return on investment at the end of the 25-year period of time, which is an acceptable term to capital markets.
And Mr. Chair, those figures that you provided do not include any sales taxes that would be generated by the project that would otherwise not exist.
No, sir, that is correct. It does not provide information on the utility sales tax, the rental tax, the construction sales tax, the tax of the individuals who are shopping and eating and living in this market, the revenue that would be provided from any additional parking, or the tax off of that parking as well, which is a significant revenue to the city.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Did you have more, Ms. Mackey?
Just a quick that this is a part of the strategic visioning for downtown, and part of our downtown focus is to drive more residential and more dense residential, particularly that residential that's not car-focused, that will utilize our light rail and our wonderfully connected pedestrian walking opportunities. And as Christine suggested earlier, this does provide a unique housing option that we don't have today. And one of the things that we're hearing from our companies in downtown is they would secure blocks of these spaces and keep them for their companies on a monthly basis as they have visitors, as they're moving employees in and out of the market. It gives them an option to be able to put their employees in. They can walk to and from those offices for the 2 to 3 months that they would be here while they're discovering if this is a market they're going to move into before they secure permanent housing. So with that, we would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
I do have cards. I'd like to go to the cards first, if that's okay with all my colleagues. We'll begin with Stephen Earle.
Want me to go over here?
Yes, sir. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes.
Good morning, Vice Mayor Valenzuela and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Earle. I'm here today on behalf of Amstar and Transwestern. I wanted to introduce you to the individuals that are here. Dan Cohen is from Amstar and Josh Delk is from Transwestern. The three of us are really here to answer questions that you may have about the project. We think staff's done a wonderful job presenting the overall aspects of this project. Having lived in the city and area since 1976, I've watched the downtown as an entity at its lowest ebb. And now seeing it in the last 5 years blossom is actually a huge credit to the City Council. But for your vision, we'd still be looking at dark streets at night. But one of the things that is, prime motivation here is to not only work and play in the downtown, but actually live in the downtown, to activate the retail spaces and to provide housing for the employment so that the downtown stays alive 24 hours a day. That's always been the goal, and we have wonderful entertainment elements downtown and sporting venues, and new restaurants are popping up everywhere. And we have the Herberger Theater. All of these things are in walking distance from this site. So that's the key, that we want to provide these Class A units, small though they may be, but highly amenitized. I mean, the 6th floor of this project, first floor is, just to recap, the first floor is a retail space of 4,500 square feet. And when you think about the size of a home being 4,500 square feet, that may not sound like a lot, but think of a home that size. It's a large space on the ground floor for retail, probably a restaurant. And the next 5 floors are going to be parking. On the 6th floor is essentially an amenity floor that has a beautiful lounge and clubhouse and cyber lounge and an outdoor pool, a kind of resort-style pool, and a big fitness center. And that's about 5,000 square feet. And then you go, the next 12 levels are all these units that we call micro units because they're in the 400 to 500 square foot range, but they're highly designed. All the open areas of the project, and we provided that information to staff. We have marble and granite, and each of the units has full-size appliances. The living room becomes the bedroom at night, but during the day it's a functional living room, and then a big walk-in area for the shower. So it's a beautiful little unit, but it's small. That's because the people that live here spend most of their time not in the unit, but in the amenity floor on the 6th level, or out candidly activating the entire area. That's the design of these units. They're very successful throughout the country. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is the top floor, because that's also a huge amenity for 5,000 square feet for the residents to go up on top of the building and have barbecues and fire pit and lounging areas. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earle. Does Councilwoman Gallego?
Question about who we expect to live here. So you've talked about people who work in our downtown. I've heard elsewhere that it might be people using facilities like the Cancer Center. So could you talk about sort of how long you'll be, looking for people to occupy the units? Because one assumes that you wouldn't, maybe if you're being treated at the Cancer Center, need a full year, and that there'll be different terms depending on who you expect to live there. And different transportation needs as well. One assumes that if you're in a medically sensitive state, you might need different transportation modes than if you're a millennial walking to City Hall.
Well, one of the main demographics for these units is the millennial workforce that's in the downtown. We may see some graduate students with the medical campus and the law school that's moving in, but these are people that have money. These are not inexpensive rents. You know, the rents are over $1,000 to $1,200 per month, and the unit size is fairly small in relationship. So it's really for that person who works in the downtown, who wants to have a unit downtown. He may actually have a home somewhere else in the valley, but it's the place he goes or she goes at the end of a long day to rest and recuperate if they're starting fresh the next morning. It's also for the patients that are in the downtown that want to be close to where their services are in the medical school. It could also be for these graduate students. And as indicated, it's for the major companies who will lease a number of these units for the people that are moving in, and they may stay for only a few months, but the company leases them for a year at a time and then puts their people into it until they've found housing elsewhere. That's why we're convinced that the parking will work, because these people rely on the fact that they have an office in the downtown where their car is parked, or they have a home where their car is parked and they use light rail. They may live actually in the larger downtown area, but they use this as a backup. But that's why light rail is so important. Bus routes are important. But the idea here is that they're going to be using the cultural elements of the downtown, the employment elements, the entertainment, the dining. These are not just students who are on a fixed budget. These are people that have the money to spend in the retail and cultural areas of downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Sean Sweat.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for the time. I just wanted to express my support for this project. I think it's a wonderful project. It's got wonderful density, which is what we need in a downtown core. It's got a wonderful parking ratio, 0.57, 0.6, which is completely supported with the downtown form code. And they also, and this is something you can count on one hand in downtown, they're not asking for any variances, right? That's rare. So this is designed well. They're using the alley for the vehicle entrance. It's a really well-designed project. I think it's of the proper density. It's really good. I also support the use of GIPLETs. I think GIPLETs, there's a lot of debate around GIPLETs, right? But I think GIPLETs, when used properly, can be a tool for the city to negotiate things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Those things might be secure funding for a public park or secure affordable housing, right? Those aren't things that we can unilaterally require, but once you enter into a contract with someone, then it becomes a negotiation. I think GIPLETs are very appropriate for those types of uses. What I and the Thunderdome, which is the group I represent, do not support and what we oppose is this particular GIPLET, and not the fact that there's a GIPLET at all, but just the terms on this GIPLET. This GIPLET is being used to solve a hypothetical problem of the developers, not the cities, not the publics. This GIPLET's being used to solve a problem that, what if the developer doesn't build enough parking? Well, if the developer doesn't build enough parking, it's up to them to figure out a solution to that, the same way the Orpheum had to figure out a solution for theirs, and they did. I mean, it wasn't easy, but they did. And that's their issue to work through, and I don't think we should be giving a public subsidy to a tax subsidy to solve their problem for them, hypothetical problem, when at the same time the public does have problems that we need addressed, and those are, I would say most pressing at the moment is affordable housing. In 10 years, if we're not careful, if we don't take some actions, proactive actions, downtown Phoenix will be a monotonous culture, and I don't want it to just be for the rich. So I would like downtown to be income diverse, and this is an opportunity to do that, where we could require a small percentage, whatever's appropriate for the pro forma, small percentage of the units be at half the rate that they charge for their other units, right? It would be a small top line reduction for them, which at $14 million, I think, could definitely still pencils for the developer, but also as a public benefit, which is what I think GIPLETs are used for, or should be used for. So I would ask that you either continue this item so that different terms can be worked out, or vote against this item, not to kill the GIPLET, but to start back at the drawing board for some different terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweat. Mark in favor, available to speak if requested. Josh Delk, would you like to speak now, or Mr. Earl just mentioned that you're here already, so just reaffirming that you're here in case anyone on the council or on this subcommittee has any questions, and you're free to speak at any point. You just let me know. Thank you. Sure. Next speaker, Bramley Paulin.
I'm here to speak in opposition of the GIPLET part. This is a gift. This isn't even city tax dollars. This is money that goes to school children, largely. There's millions of dollars that will not go to the school. Appreciate that the developer is offering some kind of fractional amount to the school, but that is not, that doesn't cover $8 million shortfall. Where is this money made up of? It obviously goes to the rest of the property owners in the area, whether by an increase in tax or a school bond override or something. This is an area that is the hottest area in town for multifamily. Every developer in town is looking to do something down here. There is no need for this GIPLET. This project would go forward whether with or without this developer. There's many units that are planned. There are many developments that are existing, others under construction, or others that are proposed that do not have a GIPLET. Why this one? There's nothing about the project that is unusual enough or the community receives such a benefit. Doesn't include a grocery store, which is needed. A grocery store might have a need for a GIPLET, an incentive. This isn't a historic building that we're trying to save. It's just not needed. And it's unfortunate that council chooses to gift tax dollars that aren't even coming from the general fund so that the rest of the community can pay for it. And I think that's wrong. I would strongly advise you to vote against the GIPLET portion. Project is great, but the use of GIPLETs needs to be reevaluated.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, David Kreider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. So this site has been a vacant lot since 1979. I mean, you'd have to be into the Bee Gees or Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, to remember 1979. I remember 1979. I bet you Paul Blue doesn't, though. So this is the type of project that we hoped to attract into downtown Phoenix when we committed to light rail, to a code that promotes a walkable downtown, to ASU and the bioscience campus. We have had a little bit of success attracting high-rise residential rental into the downtown core. We have a mid-rise project in Roosevelt Point, but every high-rise residential rental that we've tried to promote north of Van Buren has failed in the 20-plus years that I have been around. I think in this case, we have a developer that really has a chance to prove the market. The enhanced density is going to support the amenity package, really the restaurants, the bars, the arts-oriented retail that we have that's important for the people that live downtown, that work downtown, but also it's an amenity for the conventioneers that we're trying to attract into the convention center. So that amenity package that this type of high-density residential promotes, helps a broad range of folks. We are also on the cusp of becoming the premier location in the valley for technology and creative businesses. And they're following these educated young people into downtown. So we have folks that are coming into downtown because of the hard work a lot of people have done to create this great environment and this great vibe. This type of a project creates a density that brings more of these types of employees into downtown, that makes it easier for us to continue to attract these technology and creative companies, and it becomes kind of a really virtual cycle that I think is good for the city and downtown. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Greider. Next speaker, Walt Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and subcommittee members. You know, I'm a community activist for West Phoenix. I'm really neutral in this case. I always have concerns about giblets, and I think Councilman Gates is kind of an expert on that, and I trust he'll make sure. I like the idea of maybe some subsidized housing as part of the giblet, or you know, maybe not having a giblet, and maybe not having marble, and reducing the margin to 6% rather than 7%. On the west side, you know, that's all way above us. That's way above us, and we can't relate to that. But this property at one time, as one of the gentlemen indicated, was maybe a marginal property, and the people were relocated. Whoever was there was relocated. Could have been urban renewal, could have been I-10, it could have been the airport or some related part of this whole development of downtown. And so those people were bought out at the price at that time. And now the value, because of all the investment in downtown, the value has gone way up. And the people don't realize anything. They've been relocated to where I live out in West Phoenix or some other part of the city. And I think that if this project goes through, that some of this money should go to the community rather than all to downtown. That's my comment.
Enoch Bale? Bear, sorry. Mr. Bear.
My name is Eric Bear, and I own property on 6th Street, south of Roosevelt. And I really don't have a position, but I have some questions to ask. And that is, why 25 years? It seems to me that at some point the project should be viable on its own merits, somewhat of a less period of time, maybe 5 years. Once the project is built and it's fully leased up, if it's so successful, then it should be able to pay property tax like everybody else. The question is also, the second question that I have is the parking. They've not solved the parking problem. Everybody has a car. To believe that everyone's going to ride the light rail and ride bicycles is a wonderful, great dream and a goal, and something that we should absolutely work towards. But to say, well, we're not going to create enough parking for every unit, and with the theory that people are going to come here from out of state without cars, without furniture, without anything, and they're going to live there because this is such a dynamic, is a wonderful ambition. I just don't think it's based in reality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Con Engelmorn.
You have my name, Con Engelhorn, 810 North 2nd Street. We have 2 lots which are immediately adjacent to this property. We don't really have any objection to the project. These are strong people. We appreciate that. I'd like to put the giblet in perspective a little. We're neighbors. Our annual taxes on the same sized lots are $25,000 a year. We pay $50,000 a year in sales tax. we anticipate with giblets, I don't know how many giblets you guys want in downtown, but the taxpayers are getting fewer and fewer. $25,000 a year this year. Next year, our taxes have gone up considerably every year, at least 3-4%. So the giblet in general is something that we as taxpayers oppose in downtown Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I do have some cards for people who do not wish to speak. Flying E LLC, marked opposed. Quinn Wesson, marked opposed to Giblet terms for parking. William Smith, marked opposed, and Ann Rich Smith, marked opposed. Any other speakers or anyone else who'd like to be? Okay. Did you fill out a card?
I didn't. I came in late.
Okay, that's fine. You can speak, but please fill out a card as soon as you're finished. And ma'am, do you have a?
Quinn.
Oh, Quinn. What would you like to speak? Okay, great. Please state your name for the record, and you can proceed.
We just came in for an agency. And,
Ma'am, what is your name?
Sherry McCracken.
Okay.
We're property holders here in the area, and we feel that some of these groups are going to have to get together and get the bills paid. They're leaving people with long parts of time out of their homes. This is not appropriate. It's not appropriate to get people in here. We have income due from a particular lease, and we already worked that sector of the income, and we're not getting it back from SSA. So we are not required to go around the community and do free audits. The IRS and the federal government are the ones that need to come back here and make sure that we, as a family trust, get our income. And I've had 6 Phoenix people come and buy pizza while I sat in a restaurant. 3 other police officers walking by. I'm scared to death. What are they going to do? Haul me into jail because the federal government's not paying us? We asked some of the businesses to come over, and they didn't show up. So we're just thinking, what do we do? Try to get them on an agenda here and have a meeting with you guys about it?
Ma'am, are you speaking specifically on this particular project that we're covering?
We're talking about future businesses coming in here.
Okay.
How are they going to treat the current retirees? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. If you could please fill out a card. The comment was more appropriate for the open public comment. I just want to remind the public that we have to stay on track and on record for the item that we're currently discussing. Ms. Quinn Wesson?
Hi, my name's Quinn Wisson. I live in the downtown area, and I don't have a car. I heard there was a comment that everyone does, but I don't. I use transit, biking, light rail, Uber, kind of all the different ways to get around the city I do. I was also appointed by the mayor onto the Transportation 2050 Commission to oversee the funding for that plan. And, you know, really the whole goal is to push the vision of a city that you can be connected to using transit and getting around without a car. So I absolutely support this project. I think it's one of the more exciting projects that I've seen coming to my area. I live only a couple blocks away. I think it's unfortunate that the GIPLIT, you know, kind of says that we need to have more parking in the project when they've already kind of created this great design, this great way of having micro apartments in an area where you don't have to have a car, yet we're incentivizing and subsidizing more parking spaces. And I did hear a lot in, you know, the presentation that this is all about not having a car. It's not car focused. We're talking about walkability. So I would just recommend or request or whatever I can do that the GIPLIT terms be reconsidered. I agree with Sean Sweat, who had mentioned the affordability of affordable housing, to be able to create a livable area that's not just for one demographic. So I absolutely support the project. I would just reconsider the actual terms of the parking for something that would really benefit this area, and also complete the vision that the T2050 plan and all of the kind of greater visions that the city's already doing at a micro scale. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Okay, and that is the last card for this particular item, so I'll open it up to my colleagues for any questions or comments. Councilwoman Gallego.
Could you speak to the impact, the financial impact to Phoenix Elementary School before and after, and what is the status quo with it being vacant for 79 years?
Absolutely.
Since 1979, I'm sorry. Not
79 years, so it might as well be
It was
1979.
before I was born either way, so.
Oh, ouch.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been vacant for a while.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, the current revenue to Phoenix Elementary School District is the highest of all the taxing districts in the downtown market because it is such a small area that it oversees. It currently receives revenue off of that site of gosh, I'm trying to remember, it's $8,500 a year. I'm trying to remember exactly what the number is, but it's about at that rate. As we look moving forward, and if we look just at the excise tax that's collected off of that site and not the transaction that the developer has worked out privately with the school district, in year 9, of course, in the downtown market, because it's a redevelopment area and a central business district, they have an abatement of property tax for 8 years. That helps them get out of the ground and moving forward. They will pay in year 1 $123,410, of which 73% will go to the school district. 7% comes to the city, and the balance goes to all the other taxing jurisdictions. So as we move forward through the years, in year 25, should they still remain on the GIPLET, they're paying about $140,000, of which 73% goes to the school district. So if we look at the 123, 10, 70, so about $80,000 as opposed to the $8,000 will be going to the school district, sole and separate of the additional funds that they will be providing to the school district that will give them actually significantly more money than they're receiving off the vacant lot today.
Wonderful, thank you. And so the school district is in support of this and believes it's financially a win for.
Yes, ma'am, we do have information and support from the school district on this project.
Wonderful. And I think it would be fabulous if they might put it in writing. That would be of value to me.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Gallego, we will actually provide that to you in the next day or two as part of your, should this committee choose to move this forward to the full council, we would have that as part of your packet.
Wonderful. And we do get a question about relocating of people. This is not a city lot, and no one was relocated, so.
Councilman Gallego, no one was relocated. This has been vacant since 1979. And so as part of this, I can't speak to what happened prior to 1979, how it became vacant, but no, it is a dirt lot and has been since that time.
Wonderful, thank you. And then could you speak to the work that we're doing on affordable housing in the downtown area?
Mm-hmm. I would love to speak to that, and then also perhaps I could provide some clarification where the GIPLET is being utilized in relation to the parking. I think there's a little confusion.
That would be very helpful.
On how that's working together. So on our affordable housing, we're really looking at holistically at the entire area of kind of Buckeye to Camelback in between the sevens, but particularly up to perhaps McDowell and from Buckeye between the sevens. And looking, Mr. Sweat makes an excellent point that the last thing we want this to do is this market to become a homogeneous high-end market that everyone can't choose to live in or in close walking proximity to enjoy all these amenities. So what staff has done is we've been working with Apartment Insights, we've been working with some local developers, our team, our housing department, our neighborhood services department, and our planning department to look at cataloging all of the residential in this market, particularly the high-density residential, and then looking from a workforce side. So the affordable, the subsidized housing is something the city handles. We have an entire department that handles that and is able to provide that guidance. But I think the question comes into play here more of the workforce housing, the people that are working in this market that perhaps aren't making the plus 100,000, they're 35,000, they're 40,000, and they want to live in this downtown market. What options are available for them? So we've been working to catalog all of those opportunities that are available and being able to show how when the newer high-rise residential comes in, some of the product that is a little older resets its market resets its rate then to remain at its attractive, keeping its occupancy rates up and creating really a market that is kind of, it oversees those opportunities. But we are working closely with planning right now to define more from a national level, where does workforce housing fit? The last thing we want to do is a fire-ready aim. We'd really like to look and see nationally what are some of those best models that have been done, and what should we be looking at as defining our workforce housing? Where should we come in the average household, not average household incomes, but the average wages in that area to allow people to live where they work? And so we are working diligently, and we'll have that back before council in very short order. I would like to provide just a little bit of I heard a couple of different things, and I think there's a misconception that the benefit from the GIPLET is being used to subsidize the parking that's not being provided. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Sweat and our last speaker. I apologize, I didn't get her name. This is exciting from the standpoint that it is reducing the parking. It is that vision. It's that 2050 vision of where we're going to be. And you look at what GM is doing and creating a whole department on driverless cars, and really, and that's, the largest car-centric company that you can think of, and those opportunities. But the GIPLET, the benefit that we're looking for on the GIPLET would actually be to support the high-density residential development itself, cost of elevator service, the cost of steel, the cost of getting a parking structure situated on 14,000 square feet. It's an engineering marvel if they're off by an inch. It's very costly to build what they're planning to build on this site, and it's simply, the rents that it would have to create would be too high. And so the parking opportunity that we're looking at, they will actually pay for Solon separately. None of the GIPLET benefit would go to that parking. This was actually a city request that they do. It was not a request as part of the opportunity to use the GIPLET with the city from the developer. They did not want to provide additional parking. That was a city request.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And thank you for the explanation on the parking and the clarification on the school district. That said, we have any other questions or comments by my colleagues? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I know GIPLETs are always hard, but this is a unique project, and I think that considering it has been vacant since 1979, this is an opportunity that the city's going to gain in the long run. So I would move staff's approval, but also asking you to continue to look to refine the cost and our participation before it comes to the full council.
A motion. Do we have a second?
And my understanding is that this is in District 7 and that the councilman is still very much negotiating on this. So I just echo Councilwoman Williams. I think we're going to be moving this forward, but it may be very different by the time it gets to council. And I think we'll all look at what the deal it is when it comes to council and whether it makes sense at that time. But with that, I second this.
We have a motion and a second. I think we all agree, not just for the benefit of one particular council member, a strong downtown is important for every one of us. And as this moves forward, it's important that the community continues to be heard and that the full council has an opportunity to discuss this. I do appreciate the clarification on the parking. I appreciate the clarification with the school district, and I appreciate the clarification on the housing in general for downtown Phoenix. That said, I am supportive of the motion. Any other questions or comments by my colleagues? We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I need to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilwoman Williams. We're nearing the end of the meeting here. The next item, item 9, call to the public. Again, we began and end this particular subcommittee with a call to the public. We don't have any cards. Future agenda items. Item 10.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, at each of your places was a reference to the items that are upcoming and the traditional discussion of what's going on with the FAA on March 2nd, as well as a request for an RFP for, this is really relates to an advertising issue for pouring rights at the convention center. And then we will continue to develop the agenda across the month, obviously responding to any questions or interests that the council has.
We'd love to get an update on Terminal 3 construction.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilman. All right. Thank you so much, Paul. This meeting is adjourned.